In a quiet Johannesburg suburb, under a winter sky, police surrounded an old farmhouse. Inside, they found papers, maps, typed documents, and handwritten notes. Evidence the apartheid state had hunted for years. It was July 1963, and without realizing it, those officers had walked into the heart of a revolution. The Rivonia Trial was not merely a courtroom battle. It was the moment an oppressed nation found its voice. It was the moment the world learned the true cost of freedom in South Africa. Welcome back. I am your host, Rihanna. By the early 1960s, apartheid's power appeared absolute. After the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where 69 peaceful protesters were killed, the state tightened its machinery of repression. The African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and other political movements were banned. Leaders were arrested, exiled, or forced underground. Nelson Mandela later reflected, "There are times when a man must choose between fighting and running away. We chose to fight." Public meetings were outlawed, political discussion became a crime, and even hope felt dangerous. But resistance found new pathways. In secret room and safe houses, activists met in whispers, debating the future of the struggle. It became clear that peaceful protests had been crushed and that another strategy was required. Walter Sisulu explains the forming of Umkhonto or Sizwe in 1961. "We were cornered. The state had closed every door. Umkhonto was not born of anger, but of necessity. Targets are chosen carefully. Infrastructure, government installation, military facilities, never civilians. The leaders were not soldiers by nature. They were thinkers, teachers, organizers. Yet they were forced into a new role. Among them, Nelson Mandela, a lawyer, activist, and strategist; Walter Sisulu, a master organizer; Governor Mbeki, an intellectual force; Ahmed Kathrada, a youth leader turned underground operative; Raymond Nhlaba, a seasoned ANC leader; Elias Motsoaledi, a trade unionist; Andrew Mhlangeni, disciplined MK recruit; and Dennis Goldberg, an engineer and strategist. Each brought skills that the movement needed. Together they formed a leadership corps unlike any South African had ever seen. And they gathered often at one place, Lily's Leaf Farm. Lily's Leaf Farm, disguised as a quiet agricultural property, was the epicenter of the underground movement. During the day, workers moved about as normal. At night, leaders gathered around a kitchen table to discuss strategy. Ahmed Kathrada later recalled, "Lily's Leaf was more than a safe house. It was a place where ideas came alive." Operation Mayibuye, the plan outlining how mass uprising would unfold, was drafted there. Political theory, logistical planning, economic analysis all took shape in that humble farmhouse. Despite layers of secrecy, the apartheid state was closing in. On July the 11th, 1963, armed police raided the property. They burst through doors, overturned furniture, and searched every drawer. Dennis Goldberg would later say, "When they kicked the door in, we knew immediately the struggle had entered a new phase." The police found coded documents, weapons, training manuals, handwritten notes, radio equipment, drafts of Operation Mayibuye. They had captured not just evidence, but the blueprint of a revolution. Arrest followed swiftly. Within weeks, most of the underground leadership was in custody. Mandela, already imprisoned on separate offenses, would join them on the list of accused. The charges carried only one possible ultimate punishment: death. The Rivonia Trial opened on October the 9th, 1963, in the Palace of Justice in Pretoria. The courtroom buzzed with diplomats, journalists, security personnel, and families. International pressure had begun to mount. Governor Mbeki wrote later, "We walked into the courtroom not as criminals, but as representatives of millions." The accused were charged with sabotage, conspiracy, attempting to overthrow the state, and preparing for guerrilla warfare. The prosecution state was built on the documents seized at Lily's Leaf, but the defense, led by Bram Fischer, pursued a bold strategy. They would not deny the political struggle. They would justify it. Walter Sisulu said of Fischer, "He understood that the trial was bigger than us. It was a trial of apartheid itself." And so the stage was set, not just for legal battle, but for a moral reckoning. Before the trial began, the accused held long discussions about their defense. Who would speak? Who could articulate not only the facts, but the ideals of the struggle? Mandela, though not the oldest, had emerged as the natural voice of the movement. For years before his arrest, he had been the public face of resistance. He had delivered speeches across the country, debated government officials, and defended clients in court. But more importantly, he had the rare ability to explain the struggle in universal terms, terms that resonated even with those who disagreed with him. Ahmed Kathrada recalled, "Mandela could speak to anyone, friend or foe, and leave them thinking." His leadership inside the prison had also been unquestioned. He had an aura, a calm authority. So when the group discussed who would address the court, the decision was unanimous. Mandela later explained, "I was chosen to speak because I had been the commander of Umkhonto Sizwe. It was my duty to explain why the struggle had taken this course." But there was another reason. Only Mandela was already serving a sentence. He faced the least additional danger in delivering a speech that might anger the judge. Thus, on the 20th of April, 1964, Mandela stood in courtroom B, not as a defendant, but as a spokesman for millions. Mandela's speech lasted 4 hours, a measured, powerful, historical indictment of apartheid. He spoke not just to the judge, not just to South Africa, but to the world. Among his words, "We believe that the government had left us no other choice but to defy it. All lawful modes of expressing opposition had been closed." He spoke about children living in poverty, families broken by past laws, and generations denied humanity. He declared, "I detest racialism because I regard it as a barbaric thing, whether it comes from a black man or a white man." And finally, the words that shook history. "It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Walter Sisulu would later say, after that speech, the trial was no longer about guilt or innocence. It became a question of justice itself. The courtroom sat frozen. Even the judge was visibly shaken. Mandela had transformed the trial. He had placed apartheid on the stand. Mandela's speech was the most famous, but each accused man contributed profoundly to the power of the trial. Walter Sisulu, a pillar of the ANC, he spoke with quiet force. "We do not want war. We want peace and justice, but we will not accept peace without justice." Govan Mbeki, known for his sharp intellect, "If it is a crime to demand the rights of a man, then I am guilty." Ahmed Kathrada, soft-spoken but resolute, "We are not motivated by hate. We are motivated by the hope of a South Africa for all its people." Raymond Hlaba, a veteran of the struggle, "We do not fear prison. What we fear is the continued suffering of our people." Elias Motsoaledi, trade unionist, uncompromising, "I chose to resist because I could no longer watch others suffer under laws that made us strangers in our own land." Andrew Mhlangeni, disciplined soldier of MK, "I knew the risks. I accepted them. Freedom is never free." Daniel Goldberg, the sole white accused, "I am here because I believe in equality. I do not recognize the supremacy of one race over another." Their words form a tapestry of conviction. Different voices, one purpose. On June the 12th, 1964, after months of argument, The accused stood for sentencing. The world held its breath. They were found guilty of sabotage. Then came the moment that would determine their fate. Death or life in prison. The judge announced life imprisonment. Dennis Goldberg remembered shouting to his mother, "Life! Life is wonderful." The relief was real, but so was the weight of what lay ahead. Families wept. Supporters bowed their heads. The struggle would continue, but now its leaders would wage it from behind bars. The prisoners were transported to Robben Island, a place designed to break spirits. They were forced into labor, breaking rocks under the burning sun. Food was poor, letters were censored, and visits were rare. Yet the prisoners transformed the island. Ahmed Kathrada joked, "We turned Robben Island into the university the government never allowed us to attend." Mandela taught politics and law. Sisulu offered wisdom. Mbeki debated economic theory. Kathrada taught history. Motsoaledi Mhlangeni trained young activists in discipline and strategy. Even the guards over time could not resist their humanity. Mandela would later write, "The cell is a strange teacher. It strips you of everything except the essentials." Prison had taken their freedom, but not their purpose. As the men endured harsh conditions, the world began to turn against apartheid. International campaigns grew. While they were in prison, the world turned against apartheid, and many activists and people wrote songs, athletes boycotted South Africa. All these things were happening. Walter Sisulu once said, "We were in prison, but our cause was free." The Rivonia Trial had given the anti-apartheid struggle global momentum. The regime could no longer hide. When Mandela walked free 27 years later, he said, "I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people." One by one, the Rivonia comrades were released. What had begun as a trial intended to crush a revolution instead built the foundation of a new nation. The Rivonia Trial was not an end. It was a beginning. Its lessons endured. That justice is worth sacrifice. That courage can outlive chains. That conviction can reshape history. Mandela said, "The struggle is my life." Walter Sisulu said, "We wanted freedom for all, not freedom for some." Kathrada later reflected, "We do not want revenge. We want reconciliation." The Rivonia men emerged not bitter, but determined to build a country founded on dignity. Lily's Leaf Farm now stands as a museum, its rooms echoing the whispers of a revolution that began around a kitchen table. Children walk through its halls, learning that freedom was not a gift, but a debt paid through courage. The Rivonia Trial lives on, not in court transcripts, not in the dusty art, but in every South African who votes freely, in every child who dreams without fear, in every life no longer shaped by racial tyranny. The men of Rivonia stood before a judge in 1964, but they spoke to the future, and the future listened. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me through this very pivotal trial in our history. Those men gave up a massive portion of their lives fighting even inside the prison and making themselves the beacons that the world could rally around for the freedom of South Africa. Thank you so much, everybody. Next week, I will dig a little bit into some of guys from the Rivonia Trial and give them their moment and their flowers in the sun. Please remember to subscribe. Give that subscribe button a little, some love. And I will see you next week. Okay. Bye.